Hello, happy Wednesday again, everyone. You know what Wednesday means? Another Taxes in Retirement Live. I am Andy Panko, host, moderator of the Taxes in Retirement Group. Today, special treat. We're bringing back for a second time, drum roll, Kevin Lyles. Kevin, how you doing?
Great, Andy. Good to be back with you.
Thanks for coming back. I appreciate it. So you were a big hit back in January when you were on, and since then you and I have become a little more professionally acquainted. I am now, as I informed the group, officially a coach slash faculty, I guess, of the Rock Retirement Club alongside you. It's a great time.
Yeah, it's great to have you over there. The members really appreciate it.
And I got my nice little Rock Retirement shirt here. Morning commute is a golf cart, everyone. How about that? All right. So today's topic, Kevin, as you all recall from last time, his focus, his specialty is kind of the softer side of retirement, the purpose, the meaning, the finding fulfillment and happiness, which depending on the person, depending who you ask, is as important, if not more important, sometimes than the financial stuff, right, Kevin?
It sure is.
In today's topic, I mean, I guess we can kind of take it wherever people choose to go, but the focus for tonight is I just generically called it living and working, everyone, because I didn't want to put in all the letters. There's a lot of work, but I think the formal title I gave it was whether you'll work and where to live in retirement. So looking forward to that. Kevin, before we get going, as people trickle in, do you mind if I give you some dad jokes?
Oh, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yes, you know the routine here. So I saw an ad that read, TV for sale, $1, volume stuck on full. I thought to myself, I can't turn that down. It's the volume, get it? Stuck on full. All right, hold on. I love eye jokes. The cornier, the better. People in New York are like, what? I don't get it. Cornea? What? And finally, my wife said, you really have no sense of direction, do you? I said, where'd that come from? You like, how about that guy? He's my new friend, my new addition.
You have sound effects now, Andy. You're growing.
I'm big time, man. Come on. I made that last week, and it's like I feel like my little sidekick, my little Ed McMahon there. So,
okay, right. I have a retirement dad joke for you.
Yes.
What do mathematicians call retirement?
A numbers game. I don't know.
Aftermath.
I get it. I like it. Good. Thank you for that. I have a real nerdy math one. I only bring out for people who are in statistics or math because I never heard of it until someone explained it to me. But someone sticks two cats on the wall. Which one stays up longer? The cat with more mu. Or anyway, mu is supposedly a math term for coefficient of friction, and the more mu you have, the more likely you are to be stuck. I had no idea when someone told it to me, but then when he broke it down, I was like, oh, that's funny. I wish I knew what mu was before that, but that's really good. Anyway, so it depends on the crowd you're in with that one. So before we get going, let me just do the disclosure here. This video is only general explanations and education. It is not specific tax, legal, investment advice. Before considering acting on anything you see in this video, first consult with your tax, legal, or investment advisor, which neither Kevin nor I are. All right, Kevin. So, working and living in retirement. Now, isn't retirement stopping work?
It used to be, didn't it?
Yes.
And maybe we all need to change our definition of retirement. But you're right. You think, what do you mean? Whether I'm going to work? Of course not. I'm in retirement. But a lot of retirees find that working some in retirement, especially when you can work at something you really love, can really add a lot to your retirement life. And so that's what we're talking about. Is I'm assuming you don't have to work,
right? But
you want to work. And there are a lot of reasons for it.
Yeah, I've heard through other folks, other planners who've been doing this quite a while, that retirement, don't just think about it as simply stopping work. It's more freedom of time, freedom of choice, right? If that means you hang out all day and do puzzles, great. If it means for you choose to do some sort of gainful employment, even if it's only a handful of hours a week, then that's fine, right? Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, for a lot of people, it's really trying out something in a field that maybe they always wanted to work in or they always wondered about, and they get to try it out in retirement or fulfill a lifelong dream that they've had that they had to put aside for whatever the reason was.
Right. Now, do you think it's something that, what am I trying to say? So someone works 40 years full steam in career XYZ, and their sort of passion or their hobby or their thing they wanted to try is completely unrelated. Any thoughts or tips or pointers for how to get into that, especially if you're in, 60s or later? It may be difficult to get hired new for somewhere you may not have had experience in before. So how do you kind of approach that?
Sure. Well, I think the first step is asking yourself why you want to work or why you're thinking about it. And let me even back up a step before that and put this into a bigger context. To me, whether you'll work and where you'll live in retirement is part of exercising the new freedom that you have with retirement, right? Mm-hmm. In other words, where you're living probably had a lot to do with where you could get a job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's how most of us chose where we live during our careers. Well, now that you're retired, you no longer have that burden. So that's why where you live can really change. But whether you'll work, a lot of us chose our career based on maybe a college major or a great job offer that we got when we came out of school. And we went into that career. And 40 years later, we wake up and we're retired. And we didn't get to pursue some of those dreams that maybe we had when we were younger. And look, a lot of those dreams weren't really practical. But guess what? You're in retirement now. You can be impractical. If Major League Baseball was your thing, well, maybe you want to go be an usher at the games and you get to go to the game every day. But the first thing to do to get to your question as to how do you go about it, the first thing you do is make sure you understand the reasons you're working. And when we ask, and by the way, 70% of retirees, people heading into retirement, say they want to work in some capacity.
Oh, wow. It is that high. Okay.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah.
Now, frankly, only about a third or so do.
Okay.
For various reasons. And we'll talk about some of those. But you need to think about the reason. Well, the number one reason people say they work in retirement is I need the money. And that doesn't mean you need the money to live necessarily, although some people, that's the case, right? They need to supplement to maintain their standard of living. But others may choose to work to add to their retirement lifestyle. Maybe your budget is, you can do pretty much everything you want, but boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could do a trip to Europe every year. And that's going to cost $15,000 to go spend a few weeks or a month in Europe. Well, maybe that's a good reason to work, is take on a part-time job, in the winter so that you can go to Europe in the summer. Or maybe it's a legacy you want to leave to your children or to a charity that you like. So when I say you need the money, that doesn't mean you need it to eat. It just means you need it to have the lifestyle you want. Second reason, a lot of people, especially people who retire early, they need health care. They need the benefits, right? Now, it has gotten easier to get health care outside of Medicare, before Medicare, but it's still not cheap. And so a lot of people decide, I'm going to take a part-time job. And you've probably heard of the companies that offer offer benefits, health benefits to their part-time employees. So that might be a reason. A lot of people say for their physical health, they want to go do something active, and that's a good reason. Or it might just be emotional well-being.
Yeah.
The challenge you need to work. We talked last time when I was on with you about those 5 functions of work.
Yep.
Do you still have that chart?
Yeah. Let me pull it up here. There we go.
Yeah. So these are the benefits or the functions you get from your career: financial stability, time management, a sense of utility or accomplishment, socialization, getting around other people, and then status or significance. You have a role in your job. So when you leave your career, you've got to find a way to replace those 5 things. We all need those 5 things in our life to either a greater or lesser extent. So working some in retirement can really help you with some of these. And so that's all of these 5 reasons, a part-time job in retirement might be able to fill some of these voids that you have. After all, you've got 50 plus hours a week if you count, a 40-hour work week and 10 hours of getting ready and commuting time.
Right.
You've got 50 hours to fill. So if you decide in retirement to spend 20 working, you still got 30 extra hours. And if you can fill some of these needs with a job, that's the way to do it. Now, so you asked me, that's a very long-winded way to get back to how do you go about doing it?
Yeah.
And it comes back to like I say, once you've identified your reasons for working, in other words, if you need the money and actually need it to pay your mortgage, to pay your utility bills, well, then you've got to figure out a job that will pay you enough to do that, right? In other words, that's going to be your primary qualifier for any job, and that's going to limit your choices. But if you don't, quote, need the money, if you're working for some of these other reasons, well, then you can be a lot more flexible. And that's just where I really think retirement becomes fun. And it comes back to, what's that lifelong dream that you had? Maybe you've always wanted to start a business that you can pass down to your children. And so retirement is a great way to do that, as long as you do it carefully.
Right.
So yeah, you're not going to have complete flexibility on what jobs you can get. There is some ageism still out there, although I think it's becoming less right now at this time, simply because a lot of companies are really hurting to find workers. So it's a good time as a retiree to be looking to get back into the job market in a part-time capacity.
I want to comment on something there quick. Getting a lot of feedback. I don't know. Can you hear that? I hear myself talking twice here, but
I hear you fine.
Okay. Coincidentally, I have a comment from David Foltz. How do you think the pandemic will affect how people view working in retirement? So you just started to get into it. People are hard up for employees, across the employment sphere. So in one sense, that'll help. But outside of that, any other sort of structural shifts?
Yeah, well, I think it's taught a lot of employers lessons about remote working, part-time work, things like that we didn't know were possible. Had you asked 2 years ago, hey, would you send all your employees home and have them work from home and keep the company operating? Most employers would have said, no way, right? Yeah. Well, now that a year and a half later, they know they can do that. And so I think it's actually helped that. How do people view working in retirement? I've heard a lot of people who are still working who say, I'm bored to death working at home all day. And I want to get back to the office. I talk to my children and they both love the freedom and flexibility of working from home, but they also miss their colleagues and just sort of miss the routine that going to work gives you.
Yeah, that's me to a T. So I started my business in late 2019, working from home. Then the pandemic happened, and still continued to work from home, as did my wife. She's been home the whole time. Otherwise, normally commutes into and out of New York City every day. And my kids were home from school. So it was cool. It was novel. It was definitely flexible, but it wore on me after a while, always being home. There's no delineation between personal and business life. And now, a couple months ago, started renting this office a mile away from my house. I don't need it. I mean, other than one relative, all my clients are outside of my state of New Jersey, but I need somewhere to go, get away, have a little more structure and routine. And I find that definitely helped me be more balanced mentally. And I can imagine the same story applies for a lot of people who are kind of forced to be home all the time now.
Yeah. So David, I think you've got 3 things going for you now. One, employers have learned that part-time and working at home arrangements can work. So maybe you can, if you will, negotiate a more flexible arrangement with an employer. 2, companies might be really anxious to take on part-time workers because a lot of businesses are down in volume. And so being able to scale their workforce might be a good thing. So I think those things are really positive towards the pandemic and helping people. And then just the overall labor shortage that we seem to have right now in a lot of service industries, which are ideal for retirees. One thing a lot of us more mature retirees have is better people skills, right? We grew up learning those people skills, whereas our children, a lot of them have been looking at their devices over the years and maybe didn't develop quite the people skills that some of the older workers have. So I think it's a great opportunity now.
That's so true. I mean, not to get off topic, but that really bugs me with my kids and every kid of that generation. The phones are stitched to their hands, right? It's so hard to extricate the kids' faces from the phones, and it's the best and worst things that ever happen. But I agree, socialization, that bothers me. Being able to talk to people, make eye contact, in front of someone without relying on always doing this.
Exactly.
Anyway, not really a question so much as a comment, but John Munn has said, retired 1 week and doing volunteer work. Now looking forward to getting a motorcycle to relive my youth.
I love it, John. I love it. And by the way, volunteer work is work. And let's talk about some of the options you have as a retiree. If you really need money, you need to earn a lot of money to supplement your retirement income, then it may be full-time work, and it's probably in the same field you left behind because that you've got experience. It's going to be easier for you to get that job. Or if you don't need quite as much money, but you need significant money, maybe it's part-time work in that same field. But then if you don't really need a lot of money, then it opens up options to do some of those other things. And you can always go the self-employment or consulting route and work on those skills that you practiced in whatever your career was. Or like I did, you can decide I'm going to learn a new area. And I was a lawyer, and so I was counseling clients. So now I'm coaching individual clients about retirement. So it's a new subject matter for me. I enjoyed it. It was part of my retirement purpose to learn that new field. And now to be able to practice and help people gives me a purpose. So that's a way to think about, what are you interested in? And what can you do that would make money? And to this point, to John's point, it can be volunteering. If you don't need money, but you need a purpose, you need help with time management, you want to be making a contribution, volunteer work's a great answer. And you can, with a lot of charities, you can do sort of a mix of paid and volunteer work, or maybe you're doing the work and you're getting paid just a little bit because they want to keep most of their money going to their mission. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways to do that.
Yeah, just bringing it back to the 5 functions of work. So John or anyone else who volunteers, another user here, I love doing. I'm not sure what this stands for, but CASA volunteer work, being a gal for kids in abuse and neglect court. Even if it's not for money, time management, sense of utility, socialization, big one, and status. Now, status may or may not play into volunteering. I guess it depends what you do and why you do it. But it's more than just money. Like everything we talk about in this group typically is the financial aspect of retirement. But look, there's 4 other big reasons or big benefits and functions of work that we rarely touch on outside of you being on here, Kevin. So thank you.
Yeah, CASA is a great organization, and being a guardian ad litem for abused kids, I can't think of a more meaningful volunteer position. I mean, I know the people, some friends of mine have done that for 20 or 30 years. And the stories they tell and the lives they've changed through doing that is wonderful.
Yeah. And here's sort of up your alley. So Cody Garrett, there were some retirees in his CFP education course. They wanted to learn more about finance for themselves and to help their family. Many in this group may enjoy that option.
Yeah, well, Cody, that's how I got into retirement planning, and I got my Chartered Retirement Planning Counselor designation because I just wanted to learn about retirement planning. It felt like I knew investments and I knew how to invest money, but I wasn't sure I knew how to spend it. And that's what sort of retirement planning is about. So I started studying that. And after a while doing that and helping people in the Rock Retirement Club with their retirement plans. But then I realized that this other stuff that we're talking about, the non-financial side, is really a big need. And so that's when I went and got my coaching certification. So that's how I got into it.
Cool. And if anyone else has comments, questions while you're watching, feel free, drop them in the post, and I can pull them up on screen here. Just looking, there's one other, not really a question, but a comment. Trying out a few part-time jobs, nights and weekends, to see if that's what I want to do in retirement after leaving my full-time job. It's nice to try out a few different scenarios.
Absolutely. Adding variety to your life. What a wonderful thing. I mean, when I was a kid and a teenager, I would try something new about every year. I would have some new fad, and I'd go all in and buy all the gear or whatever it required to do it and learn about it. And then a year later, I got bored and I moved to something else. I can't think of a better way to go through retirement is trying out jobs or hobbies and just adding to your life. Each one of them adds complexity to your life, and I like that.
Yeah. Now, do you have an opinion as to when you should start to put your toe in the water of finding other work, alternate work, volunteerism, whatever?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to those reasons. If you need money, then you need to have that planned before you start retirement, right? You don't want to pull the plug on your career till you've got enough money. But if that's not the driving factor, then I think you just need to look at these other factors that we talk about and see how important they are to you. I think a lot of us needed a break after our careers. And that might be a 3-month break. It might be a 3-year break. It just depends on each person. But you need to look at that. Are you someone that if you wake up in the morning and you don't know what you're doing next, then time management's a major issue for you? Well, then you need to think about it before you retire. That wasn't me. I knew I could wake up with nothing to do and I'd be happy.
Yeah.
And so you've just got to ask yourself how you feel about these needs. Are you, depending on where you live and the friends you have, and, especially if you're retiring early before most of your friends, then you're home. It's like being home with chicken pox. Did you ever have chicken pox as a kid, Andy?
Funny you ask. A good friend of ours has shingles now, and come to find out, decades later, shingles is for people who had chicken pox. Now shingles is in your body. Well, I asked my mom, and I apparently never had them. I had like 10 individual pox. So I don't know if I had enough to have full on chicken pox in my life. But anyway.
When I was a child, some 50 years ago, if you got chicken pox, you weren't sick, but you couldn't go to school. So it was wonderful, right? You get to spend a week at home when everyone else is in school, but then you quickly figure out there's no one to play with.
Yeah.
Because all your friends are in school. It's sort of the same thing when you retire early is, do you have people to socialize with? The point being, depending on how strong you need these things, that's when I think you need to decide whether you need to line this up in advance or figure it out after you retire. I think that's a perfectly fine way to do it for a lot of people.
Yeah. My mother, so she retired from Verizon, the phone company. She started when it was just the phone company decades ago. So she retired, better part of 20 years ago. And she was young, in her 50s at the time, and said, I can't just stop working. So her last day at Verizon was on a Friday after 35 years, I think it was. And she had already lined up on Monday. She was starting part-time as basically a gopher for a local law office, running around, getting lunches, going to the post office, whatever. And she ended up staying there 10 plus years and became the office manager and loved it. Partly, there was some money involved, obviously, that she got from it, but it was the socialization. It was a reason to get up and do something, sense of purpose, fulfillment. So that worked out really well for her. She's since full on retired, but, I thought that was interesting.
And it sounds like
Friday, started Monday.
It sounds like she was in touch with her needs, and she knew she needed that purpose to get up. And that's, a lot of us have a very strong work ethic. And if you don't have work to do, however you define that, then you have a feeling that something's missing. Yeah. So that's, for people that really feel that way, that, if I'm not working, if I'm not being useful to someone, then life's not worth living. Well, then you better figure this out before you retire.
Yeah. And I think you've probably seen this more than I have, but a lot of people don't know that or don't have that self reflection, inflection, I don't know, but they work their whole life, may not know that work is such a large part of their reason for being and sense of purpose and value. You find out the hard way. You retire cold turkey or get pushed out the door, whatever, and now it's like, now what, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's important to figure that out before you pull the trigger or have the trigger pulled upon you, and find out the hard way.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about retirement, I've been retired 3.5 years now, is you have time to get in touch with your feelings. If you're not someone who's very introspective, then you need for me, I needed to retire and clear my head and start thinking about it. And that's sort of back to where I started this, which is, you're exercising that freedom. And it's not, I think, the reason a lot of people don't make these decisions. They don't think about whether they want to work and where they want to live. They just don't work because you don't work when you're retired.
Right.
And they continue to live where they've always lived, not because that's the ideal place, just because they haven't really been thoughtful about it and said, yeah, I've got the freedom to choose. So what's the best choice for me? And that's what we're really talking about here.
Yeah, right. We have a question about moving out of the U.S. Should we hold that for now? Anything else you want to hit on about working?
Do you want to spend a couple minutes talking about starting a business? Because I know that's a real popular thing
definitely
with retirees, and I love the idea, because talk about giving your life meaning and purpose. But I always like to say, just be thoughtful about it, and the caveats are the things I want people to think about. Number one, what does it cost you to get into this business? You don't want to put your financial stability at risk by retiring one day and putting down all your 401k money into a franchise or something.
Right.
The majority of businesses fail. It's always going to be that way. So don't put your financial security at risk. The second thing is to be realistic about how much time and effort a new business takes. And you've really got to talk with your spouse. If your spouse is ready to start traveling and you want to start a new business, you've got a problem there. You need to negotiate and talk it over with each other and find a happy medium in there. So that's just, I always tell people, I love the idea of starting a business, but it's really, most new businesses are almost all-in enterprises.
Yeah.
We were talking about a guy who retired who loved to be outside and work with his hands in the dirt. And he started this business and he kept taking on new jobs. And suddenly he found he was spending all of his time back at the office, either, doing payroll or sending out client bills. And he wasn't out in the sun anymore working with his hands. And so keep in mind why you're starting a business and what you want to get out of it, and just make sure you get that out of it. If you're someone who just wants to work out in the sunshine with your hands in the dirt, you don't need to start a business to do that. Maybe you just need to go take a job as a gardener, and do that. So just be honest with yourself about what you want. So those are my tips on a business.
Yeah. You can find yourself ending up an accidental business owner. Then you're running a business. You're not doing what you wanted to actually do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's good to know. Now, I'm just curious, how many people you've talked with, worked with, counseled, who they and their significant other have issues, and those issues are driven by these planning things as opposed to financial matters? Is it more times than not?
Sure. Look, I think, and we've all heard of gray divorce. It's over 60 years old. It's the biggest category of divorce of any age group. Mm-hmm. So something's going on. I tend to think, I don't have research to back this up, but I tend to think a lot of it were relationships that were damaged going into retirement. Okay. And then all the stress and the change that comes with retirement puts it over the top, or finally they have time to think about their marriage. Right. And maybe it's not so good. But that being said, I do think a lot of couples fail to talk about what they each want out of retirement and need in retirement. Right. Are you someone that needs a lot of alone time? Well, retirement, especially, we've learned this past year where couples have been basically quarantined in their home 24/7. That's a lot of together time. And if one of the partners or both of you need a lot of alone time, you better figure that out before you retire.
Right. Find out the hard way.
Yeah. My wife had stopped working many years before I retired to take care of the kids. And, so her empire was the house, right? And the activities she based out of our house. I knew if I start hanging out all day in the house, that's not going to be a good thing.
So she's like, Kevin, go sit on your camera and microphone and talk about retirement with people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I close the door to my den and I try to be as quiet as I can.
Right. Yeah, whatever works.
Exactly.
Good. Thank you. That's helpful. I'm sure there are a lot of people who do, again, I don't have facts to back it up, but start a business, some passion project, hobby, whatever. Like, why not give it a go, make a little bit of money at it while I can? To your point, just be careful it doesn't get overwhelming and consume you.
Yeah, and figure out something that doesn't cost a fortune to get off the ground. Yeah, right. I think that's the important for most retirees. You don't want to go all in on a new business, I think, in retirement.
Yeah, I'm not pitching, promoting, or advocating this, but you mentioned 401k. There is a special way or process called the ROBS, rollover business startup or something like that, where you can actually create a company, start a 401k with that company. You would roll over your other IRAs or 401ks from wherever into the company's 401, and you're allowed to use that 401 as equity investment in your startup. That's dicey. I mean, if it works, it works, but you got to be a real risk taker, and you're putting at risk not only your future livelihood from this venture, but you're funding it with all of your other retirement savings. So if this business goes bad, it's going bad on two fronts. So definitely.
Yeah, that's probably better for someone that has a nice pension.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All right. Couple questions here about moving/living. Should I jump into it?
Absolutely.
Let's go for the big one right off the top. What are your thoughts about moving out of the U.S. for retirement?
I love it. I'm not that adventurous, so it's not for me, but I know a lot of people who've done it. What I talk to them about is just, and let's assume you're not going somewhere where you lived before. Okay. So if you've lived here in the U.S. your whole life and you've just decided, I love Italy and I want to go there, great. I have no problem with that. What I'd like you to think about is don't go all in on that decision. In other words, maybe you rent out your home here rather than sell it. Maybe you certainly, I would say, rent there for a while till you know the area well and you know how long you want to live there. Think about the future you. Don't just think about today and what you want to do for the next 5 years. Think about what the 75-year-old you might want. And is it still going to be as convenient living in a foreign land then? So all I'm saying is go for it, but you don't have to do a permanent change.
Yeah, that's great advice in general. Think about the future you. And I think that's fair to say about most, if not all, aspects of planning for retirement, whether it's financial, whether it's not. And I'm stealing this line from Jim Saulnier. I know you were on his podcast, Retirement and IRA Show, recently talking about this very topic, living and working. But he says all the time, the 40, 50, 60-year-old you is planning for the 70, 80, 90-year-old you. What you think may sounds good today, the amount of complexity and difficulty and craziness in your life you're willing to do today and may enjoy, are you going to enjoy it at 70, 80, 90 years old? Right. So always view decisions, financial or otherwise, through that lens. What's the 80-year-old you going to think about what you're setting up today? I like that. That's a good approach. Living abroad, same thing.
That's great advice. And then the coach in me wants to say, but if this is something you've thought about doing, go for it now. Because one thing about retirement is things can change on a dime. A family member falls ill. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a spouse or sibling or someone, and you're needed to fill a caregiving role. Or maybe it's your own health. That can change with any visit to the doctor. So, when you're first retired, you're as healthy as you're going to be. Go for it. I love the idea of adding variety. And, this question almost looks like moving out of the U.S. for retirement means this is permanent. And for some people, that will be a good thing. For most people, it probably isn't, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's lots of other angles, and I'm far from an expert on international planning matters, but I guess depending where you're going and why, you need to consider medical, access to medical care. How good is it? How cost effective is it? Do you plan on coming back to the U.S.? If you do, you got to worry about Medicare, right? Because there'll be a penalty if you don't sign up for that when you're supposed to. If you leave the country until you're 85, come back and sign up then, you're going to have a massive 20-year delay penalty tacked onto your Medicare. General cost of living, safety, security, depending where you're going, right? Things like that. I guess depending on the country, there's lots of different angles to have to hash out. But and even taxes, right? You're going to keep some place here. You're going to have accounts in two different places, or what legal resident are you for tax purposes? There can be a lot of hairiness to figure out here. So just think it through. Okay. Yeah.
So let's start with sort of the fundamental decision about where you're going to live in retirement. And so I think it's just important to think you now have the freedom and the flexibility to consider other options. And one exercise I like to have my coaching clients do is to sit down. And if you're married or in a relationship, both of you do this independently, then come back together and talk about it. But just pick out 3 different living arrangements. And it might be entirely different locations, or it might just be type of living. Now you're in a city and you want to move to the country, or vice versa. But just think of 3 possibilities that you've thought of, because we've all thought of living in different places. And then just whiteboard it. Sit down and think, how would my life in retirement be different if I moved there? And so you want to start with perhaps the costs. If you're moving from a very high cost of living urban area and you're going to move to a more rural area, maybe it's a low tax or a no tax state, you may be able to completely change your retirement lifestyle.
Yeah.
You might go from underfunded to overfunded, to use a financial planning term that I hear. And that's fine. But also think about the other things. Think about the socialization. Are you going to have friends and family that you're missing? Or maybe you're moving closer to family. A lot of retirees move where their kids move so they can see the grandkids more often.
Yeah.
Great reason to go somewhere. I always caution people, don't buy, because kids move a lot. So you don't want to be buying a new home every time your kids move. But so maybe you go rent for a year or two. But
funny you say that. This just popped up. I'm selling my house and definitely renting for 1 year until I decide where in the country I want to go in retirement. I will visit different cities to test them out.
Perfect. And I love that, because even if you've found the right city, you may need a couple years of living in different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
It's and there's no reason not to rent for a while. A lot of us of our generation, my generation, I should say, Andy, not our. You're far too young to be in mine. Is we think of home ownership as the great goal in life, and it really doesn't have to be that way. Mm-hmm. So I love this person who's going to definitely rent for a while. But I would say even after you found your city, maybe try a couple places. Maybe go live in a condo downtown, and then live out in the suburbs on a farm, and just try a couple. And that's what this exercise is. Pick those 3, really think about how your life would be different there, and then decide, do I want to consider a move? You don't have to move, but I think you'll be better off having thought of going through this exercise to at least think of all your options.
Yeah.
Because we really do have the ability to design our retirement lifestyle, and most of us don't do that. We just go on doing what we've done before. We're not going to work every day, so we find a couple activities, maybe we play more golf, or we go, hiking or whatever a little more, but it's basically the same life. Nothing wrong with that, but have you considered how your life could be better? Are there things you want to accomplish or to do that you can build into your life, and where you live can have a big impact on that.
Yeah. So let me just turn this around on you a little bit. So you're from Ohio. You have a house in Florida now, and you're snowbirding is the word we use in the Northeast. I don't know if you use the same,
Yes,
but
we do.
How did that come up for you in the decision to keep both places, or keep one place, get another place on top of it?
Yeah, well, it's a great choice, and a lot of people, it's another one of those retirement freedoms that people will have. A lot of us have a lot of home equity built up in our family home because we needed 4 bedrooms for the kids. We needed whatever. We're close to work, so it's a higher cost area usually when you live that way. Mm-hmm. Well, one popular option for retirees is to sell that big family home right there in the popular suburbs, move to a lower cost area, and with the money they save there, buy a cabin on the lake somewhere. Okay. So a second home. Now, in my case, we had actually bought the home about 10 years or so before I retired. Okay. And used it as a vacation home. So we were pretty familiar with the area, and we'd vacationed there for 20 years. We changed our domicile, which is another financial issue, going from a tax state. Ohio is not a high tax state, but it has state taxes, to Florida where they don't. And so that's a possibility if you're going to spend, half the year or so at a new place. Obviously, one big reason to move and to do something like this is to chase the weather. We've never tried Florida in the summer and Ohio in the winter. For some reason, we tend to do just the opposite.
I wonder why.
And think about where your family lives, and will they want to come visit you where you are? But I think having 2 homes has a lot of positives for a retirement lifestyle. For one, it gives us new activities. There are things I do in Florida literally daily when I'm there that you cannot do in Ohio. I can't go walk the beach in Ohio very easily. I guess I could go up to Lake Erie, but
not the same.
So it's a change in lifestyle and activities. Climate gives you a second location. It adds a lot to your life, but there are some negatives you need to think about too. Obviously, the costs. So you've just got to get your pencil out and sharpen it and really look at the numbers, because you don't want to squeeze yourself financially. Right. But go ahead. You got a question?
This sort of relates to what you were saying. You got this, often large house, a lot of equity in near where you work, high cost area. Question is, downsizing is another issue. Do you stay or do you go? I guess there's a lot of angles to that, but do you work with anyone or have you come across people who they feel the want and the need to keep that large house, even if it's now empty, other than, them and their spouse perhaps?
Oh yeah. The majority of retirees stay in the same home. So that's just a fact if you look at the numbers. So obviously a lot of people do it. I think a lot of those who do just haven't really thought about it too much. But downsizing, as I say, if you can trade one too big home that you don't need, that creates a lot of maintenance, both costs and physical labor to keep up. Right. You can trade down and then add a second home somewhere for the same money. Wow. Just look at what you've done to your retirement.
Right. Yeah. Why not?
Another way, though, to do that is you don't have to downsize. If you want to stay in that home and you like it because maybe the kids like to come back there and bring the grandkids, then maybe a reverse mortgage is the way to go. Maybe you can tap into that equity as a retiree. That's a big asset that a lot of us have, that to just sit there and never use it during your lifetime is really not a good use. I mean, if you think about it from a financial planning, it's like, what are you thinking?
Right.
Why would you just let that asset stay dormant? So maybe it's a reverse mortgage.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people do have a lot of equity tied up in their house, and they will never use it so long as they're alive, unless they, unlock it and tap it somehow.
And in most cases, the kids don't want that house. It's not like they want to inherit your big family home. They have their own home and their own life by that time. So,
sure.
If you can tap into it, why not do that if it adds to your life? So I think, though, the downsizing question is, what does it make possible if you downsize? In other words, don't just think of dollars and cents. Think of, how is this going to change my retirement lifestyle? And
Right.
move accordingly.
That's a great way to view it. We have a slightly technical question. What do you think of continuing care retirement communities? Presumably poster single, no kids, thinking that would be a good option for me when I start slowing down. For what it's worth, I actually reached out today. A good friend of mine works for a continuing care retirement community organization. I asked him about coming on in a few months, so I should have someone who specializes in ccrcs at some point. But Kevin, your thoughts about them?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's, for most people, it's probably not when you first retire are you going to start looking at those, although some do. But certainly as you go into your slow go years, if you will, I think it's a great option. And it comes with so many benefits other than just the care that you either need now or may need in the future. The socialization, just the activities involved are at a lot of these places are wonderful.
Yeah.
Florida seems to be it must be in the top 2 or 3 states in the nation for CCRCs. And the ones I've been to and looked at are just wonderful facilities and wonderful communities.
Yeah. And just for those watching at home who may not be aware what CCRC is, so continuing care retirement communities basically can look and feel different ways. Could be a organization of houses, could be apartment type places, but the structure is it's a place you go to, and it's intended to provide you the shelter, the housing, and the services you need throughout the remainder of your life. So you can move in and be totally independent, no in-house medical care, whatever. You live on your own, and as life happens, you progress. Whether you physically or mentally start to slow down, there can be different options within that community of more hands-on care, all the way up until the point where you basically have 24-hour live-in care right there in the community assisting you. Is that a fair representation of what a CCRC is, Kevin?
Yeah, that's right. In a lot of cases, you need to move in your independent living stage. In other words, they don't let you just start out in the assisted living or in the nursing care. But that's exactly what it is. You just sort of move to the area. And often you'll have, in the independent living, there'll be individual sort of patio homes. And then maybe the assisted living, you're in an apartment. And then the nursing care, you're in a nursing unit. So, and they have all kinds of amenities, some of them, and things. The other thing, Mary, for you, though, because you haven't started, you're talking about the future when you start slowing down. So for now, have you thought about any of the adult living communities? That might be something to think about, because the one thing as a single retiree you want to really look out for is isolation. You want to make sure you're in an area where you're actively engaging with others. And you can do that almost anywhere, but a lot of these retirement communities or senior living communities, that's what they're there for. They have planned activities on a daily basis that you can get involved with. So I like options like that in some cases.
Yeah, that's great. Cody, another comment about trying stuff out. Another interesting approach is to travel and stay in Airbnbs in different places rather than buy a vacation home that may become stale after a short time.
Yeah.
That makes sense. However you can do it, right? This is interesting. My kids love our big place, but 4 visits a year can't justify it to me.
And I completely agree. You have to decide what works for you first. That's your priority. And if you need to move to a much smaller, maybe lower cost house that's easier to maintain, well, guess what? A room down at the Marriott's probably, $100 a night for a few visits a year.
Right.
You'll probably come out way ahead financially and be a lot happier.
Yeah, I've anecdotally heard of people buying, in or near retirement, buying the dream house on the lake or the beach, with these hopes and these, romanticized visions that the family's all going to come from throughout the country, bring their kids, multi-generational, this big love fest for a week or so, and ends up it just doesn't really happen, or at least you can't sync it up as much as you like because people are working and kids got school and activities and whatever, and it's hard to get everyone to travel and coordinate to come. So you end up buying this big place with multiple bedrooms, and maybe once a year, you have this everyone gathering like you hope they would. So,
right.
Sounds good on paper, right? But you got to think about the practicality of things like that, I guess.
Yeah. And even going back to Cody's comment, it's another area, much like when we were talking about work, whatever you start doing doesn't have to be permanent. Your living arrangement doesn't have to be permanent. Now, you've got to be a little more cautious if you're buying a home, because you can't be buying and selling a home every 3 or 4 years. It's just costs you too much, both financially and emotionally. But you can plan 10 years at a time. And, if your retirement's 30 or 40 years, you've got 3 or 4 choices. So that's the way I just think about the next phase, always looking to how will this work, in the next decade? Is it going to? And that way you can sort of plan how you use it, how much money you're going to put into it.
Okay. So there's a few other random comments here about houses, pros and cons, but are there general considerations for where you live? Now, I know a guy posted something today in the Rock Retirement Club about each state ranked by how good its healthcare is, between accessibility, affordability, and quality. And like any state rankings, I know these things are, I don't want to say largely bunk, but very subjective, lots of fudging that goes into it. So what other things should be considered, and or where do you go to help you make decisions and try to do some sort of quantitative ranking, if you will, of places to consider when trying to decide where to retire, where you'll live?
Yeah. I mean, I think healthcare, especially as we age, has to be pretty high on our list, right? And it will depend on what's your current medical condition. How do you have to see doctors regularly? Well, if so, you better stay where it's convenient to do that. One of the choices, if you decide to have 2 homes that are in like Ohio and Florida, you're probably not going to be a good candidate for Medicare Advantage, which requires you to see a provider network. Okay. It doesn't travel very well. You probably have to do traditional Medicare if you're going to do that. So, you want to think about that. For a lot of people, where you live really affects your health. So people with arthritis, they don't want to be in a humid climate. They may need to go to the desert, to drier areas, or some people can't tolerate heat. Others can't tolerate cold. So, housing really affects a lot of your life.
Yeah. This may be a coincidence, but I had shoulder surgery in May of 2019. And it was still achy for a while. 6 months later, we did a trip to see relatives in Arizona, and my shoulder was still achy up until then. After a few days in Arizona, it was completely fine. The achiness went away. I don't know if it was the dry weather or a coincidence or a bit of both, but it cured me. I'm convinced Arizona cured my shoulder.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I know people who have to get to humid, have to get to dry. So I believe them.
2 quick funny comments. So Cody's saying many retirees move closer to their favorite child.
It's how you vote, right?
To which Mary said, "Wait, parents have a favorite?" Oh man, it's quite the variety show tonight. So healthcare obviously important. Specific doctors, conditions you have, certain areas will, I guess, have better or different coverage. And I actually have a client who's recently retired and moving and has TRICARE, the healthcare for retired military. And I found out that your providers, your primary cares, are based on the closest base to where your residence is. So these clients live on, one side of the country. They're considering moving elsewhere from that side of the country and realize, oh, wait, my favorite doctor I've been going to for 20 years, I'm going to need to find a new one because I'm going to have to go find someone, next to the closest base from where we're going to live. So that's another consideration, albeit specific to military retirees. But to your point, Medicare Advantage may sort of hamstring you a little bit because that doesn't quite travel nationally not nearly as portable as traditional Medicare.
Yeah, another factor I tell people to think about, and you might not associate this with where you live, but your identity in retirement. When you leave work, if you got a lot of your identity from your career, you need to figure out who you're going to be. And where you live can affect that. If your whole life is going to be, you're a theater lover and you want to support the arts and go to theater, well, you're fairly limited in where you want to live, right?
Right.
I mean, there are a few areas in the country that is going to be really good for that. If that's going to be your identity, or if you're someone who loves to ski, well, guess what? Coming to Ohio is probably not going to make you happy.
Right.
Or Florida. So
Yeah, exactly.
I guess water ski maybe, but so think about who you want to be and how you're going to identify yourself in retirement. And then think about, well, does where I live either help or hurt that?
Yeah. Right. And so what are the other big considerations? So we touched on healthcare, proximity to family / friends, let's call it, availability of activities relevant to you and what you want to do, taxes, everyone already sort of knows about, right? The high tax, the low tax states.
And cost of living goes right with the taxes, right? It can be low tax, but really a high cost of living area. Right. As an example, Miami in Florida. If you want to live in Miami, it's a pretty high cost area to live in, or Naples for that matter, really high cost area to live. So you want to think about the overall general cost of living, as opposed to just, does the state have an income tax and how are property taxes, which is the first thing we all think about.
Yeah. Quick side story about Naples. We went there with some friends a couple of years ago to True Lux, the seafood place in Naples. Never heard of before, but it was nice and whatever. I got oysters as an appetizer. My friend got tuna tartare, and it looked so good. I was upset I didn't get it. So we had our entrees, and for dessert, they got whatever, traditional dessert, and I got tuna tartare for dessert because it looked that good. And sure enough, it was that good. That was the best tuna tartare I ever had. Was in True Lux in Naples, Florida. So if anyone's interested in tuna tartare,
I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for that little side note there.
Some other considerations, and one is even inside your own home. Think about, do you need to age-proof your home? Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you've decided I'm going to stay in my house forever, or I'm going to buy a new house and live the rest of my life there, then you really want to think about age-proofing it and thinking about mobility. But it's not just inside the walls of the house. It's, where am I going to get an ice cream cone? Those kinds of considerations. Where am I going to get my hair cut? Where am I going to go to church? Is there a bank nearby? All those kinds of things. How convenient is it to live? And this is really where you want to think about the 75, the 80-year-old you. Is this still a convenient area to live? Again, you don't have to make a permanent decision, but if you think you're making a permanent decision, then you need to think about those issues and how your lifestyle is going to change as you go through retirement.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I mean, I think everyone's kind of aware of the quote unquote age in place, having, grab bars in your showers and having, flat threshold rooms to transition into and out of. But outside the house, I never really thought about that, right? Like, where are you going to go do your daily errands? How easy and accessible is it going to be to get where you need to go?
Transportation, a lot of people aren't going to drive for the rest of their life. They're not going to drive cars. So can you get to the shopping center? Can you get groceries? Can you go to the store? Just those kinds of considerations. How easy is it to get around? That's where the CCRCs, the senior living communities, I think really excel, because they have been thoughtful about that, and their whole communities are planned around that.
Yeah.
And even ones that don't have those kinds of amenities within the community, they usually, 3 days a week will take a bus to various stores. And so you just need to think about, how am I going to get around as I age? And a lot of it will have to do, that the one person who put the question up was single with no kids. So you're going to need some help. And so think about those kinds of things as you're thinking about where you want to live.
Yeah, definitely important. Looks like that might be it for the comments and questions for now. It's 9:00 already. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. And not rushing you out, but anything else? Any other points to consider for where you'll live? Not just physical location, but actual, building and considerations around the building.
Yeah, and this isn't a big point, but it's one to think about, and that is the timing of when you're going to do this. It's a lot easier to get financing if you're going to finance a home while you're still working and can show an income. certainly not impossible to do it as a retiree, but you have to go to a lender who will do asset-based lending as opposed to income-based lending.
Right.
And there are fewer of those, and it's just more difficult. So if you know you're going to do something, maybe it's better to do it while you're still working and to close that transaction. Second, a big decision is, are you going to finance a home that you buy? Do you want to take a mortgage into retirement? That's a financial decision, but it's also a sleep well at night decision.
Yeah.
Some people really don't like to have debt. So think about that. And then the other thing that, especially on the second home decision, don't spend all of your after-tax dollars. I'm going to get some tax advice in here, Andy.
Do it.
Don't spend all of your after-tax money on a second home or on any home and leave yourself stuck with only taxable accounts, qualified accounts that give you no flexibility in retirement to control your taxable income.
Right.
You've worked hard to create that. Don't blow it all on a big purchase as soon as you start retirement.
Right. And then have no control over the taxability of it, get stuffed with a huge tax bill.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would not be good. This person here, my daughter wants to renovate her basement as a future independent apartment for me. I will not commit. Not sure I should be so close to her and her family. Do you hear that a lot?
Sure. And I hear, all kinds of different thoughts from both the daughter, the mom, and on both sides of it. Maybe it's the daughter doesn't want mom there all the time, or maybe it's daughter's husband who doesn't. But it's great that your daughter is thinking about your future and hopefully use that to have a conversation. In other words, maybe it's great that you would move in near them. Maybe it's not, but don't just keep quiet about it. Have a conversation, let your daughter know what you're thinking of for your future. I think a lot of us, we don't want to be burdens on our children. We don't want to interfere with their life. If that's important to you, have the conversation with her, let her know, because a lot of children, I've been through this now as a child with parents who were aging and my wife's parents who were aging. And we're not there yet. I don't think my kids are worrying about that yet, but I'm at a point where now that I'm retired, I want to start having conversations with them. So talk about what you want, because one gift I think you might be able to give your daughter is, I don't want to live in your basement because I don't want to interfere with your life. That's important to me that I not do that. Let her know that, and then maybe she won't feel guilty that mom is in a home somewhere when mom gets old. Right. So, communicating with your family members is so important. Yeah, definitely. I can see this getting contentious otherwise, right? If you don't hash that out beforehand and you go ahead and move in and there you are. This wasn't me, but I have a sort of personal experience with this. So don't underestimate the convenience of living in a city in retirement. A friend did so, and her bank was across from her apartment building. There was a grocery store attached. The city had buses that ran routes. Her building had an elevator. Not to mention, good restaurants within walking distance really opened my eyes to that possibility. So my in-laws, case in point, they lived their whole life. Well, they were born in one of the boroughs of New York City, but then lived their adult lives in the suburbs of Long Island and retired back to New York City, which I was like, what? But it's so perfect for them. I mean, they've always been city folks at heart, and the inconvenience of everything. They're big into the museums, the restaurants, the mass transit suits them really well. They don't want to have to shovel the driveway anymore, or cut grass. They absolutely love it. And for them, that's their idea of retirement. Whereas most people would be like, nope, I'm going to some place in Florida or something, or right. Not to knock Florida, but yeah, no, it's a very popular thing for a lot of new and younger retirees to do, is go live in the city, even if they haven't. As you say, you open up all the restaurants, the arts, just the activity. Yeah. That's exciting. And so absolutely, that's a great option. Yeah. All right. Great food for thought tonight. Mary says thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thanks, Kevin. Kevin as well. Awesome call tonight, Kevin says. All right, hold on. Ooh, one more just came in.
I didn't pre-read it yet. Hopefully it's nothing silly or bad. Retired from Verizon 6 months ago and struggling with these issues. Wife is still working, so we are anchored for a couple years. I'm still figuring out structure issues. Many good points. I'm going to watch again with the wife tomorrow.
Oh, cool. Great. I love to hear that. And I want you both to do that exercise separately. In other words, imagine 3 places you might live, map out how it would change your lives, all the pluses, all the minuses, and then come together and see how your lists look. It's a great opener to having really good communication with your spouse.
Yeah. So Kevin, if people want to find you, I mean, they can find us both in the Rock Retirement Club, should they choose to join that great little community. But otherwise, if someone wants to reach out to you or find out more about what you do or et cetera, how do they get to you?
Yeah, the easiest way is through the rockretirementclub.com website. I'm on there. You can, and my email's on there. You can send me a message if you've got a question about any of this stuff, and I'll be happy to get back to you.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you. There's a few more thank yous coming in here. David Fultz, probably he and Cody Garrett are the ones always on every week consistently. So thank you,
Wonderful.
David Fultz. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you all. Looks like that's it. Kevin, just stick around a second. I'll keep you around after I kill the broadcast here. But thanks again for your time, and take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay.